time?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
We'll know in a very short period of time, but it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
I see issue with that. And again, hey.
You're not going to be able to insult your way to the presidency. That's not going to happen.
I don't know who created Pokemon Go, but I'm trying to figure out how we get them to have Pokemon go to the polls.
I'm Ted Cruz, and my pronoun is kiss my ass.
So when you think about it, there is great significance to the passage of time in terms of what we need to do to lay these wires, what we need to do to create these jobs.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to
Not good. Believe me, not good.
Hello, dissidents. Welcome one and all to a Thursday matinee edition, special time, special post-election recovery time slot here, Thursday, 2 p.m. edition of the Do Dissidents podcast. Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dobler, of course.
Hola, amigos y amigas.
How's everybody doing today? Thanks for joining us here at this special time. We're sorry to our across-the-pond viewers who like to enjoy an afternoon matinee on Thursday. We just had to catch up on a little sleep and have time to prep the show because I fell asleep pretty much right after we got off the air yesterday. Had a little bit of time last night, but not much time. It has been quite the busy few days for us, but thank you guys all for sticking with us throughout the week. We have had great crowds, obviously a record crowd on election night, 117,000 on YouTube alone for that stream. And then yesterday, we had a great turnout as well for a special Wednesday show. And today we're starting out 583 in the YouTube chat, 578 on Rumble. How do you like that? We even got 4 over on Twitch. I thought Twitch was going out of business now. I thought something happened with Twitch.
Yeah, what's happening to
Twitch?
Twitch?
In trouble. What's going on with Twitch over there? We never found out how to work that. We just broadcast there anyway.
I just saw an article because Twitch isn't that one of those one of those weird.
No, that's with Amazon.
No.
Amazon owns Twitch now, don't they? That's where like Hassan. That's
Do
a major
they?
thing.
Do
Yeah.
they?
Oh, so by the way, so we're switching to Rumble for the last few segments of today's show, just because we're going to show the view, and the view is like a very touch and go with copyright on YouTube. We're also showing an APAC ad that they made, which has some music that might be an issue. We just don't need the headache. And then we're going to do Rabbi Shmuley versus MAGA for Palestine activist over on Rumble. So we actually have 3 Rumble segments today. Now, I know some of you guys say, why do you switch to Rumble? Because I can't watch Rumble because I live in France or whatever. So if you live in a place where you can't access Rumble, actually, it's good that I mentioned Twitch. You could always go to Twitch, too. When we say we're switching to Rumble, we're also broadcasting on Twitch. So you can find us and watch us there if Rumble is unavailable to you. We don't bother turning off the Twitch stream. I don't know what their censorship rules there are, and I don't care. I mean, if they ban us from Twitch, they ban us from Twitch. Doesn't matter. So we just leave the stream going. So you can watch us on Twitch when we switch to Rumble. But we are going to be switching to Rumble for essentially the second half of the show today. So we do have quite a bit to do over there. So that will be in due time, dodissidents.com/Rumble. You type that into your URL. It takes you right to this live stream, thanks to Jake's handy hyperlink creating skills. All right, why don't we start out by showing the highlight of Kamala Harris's concession speech yesterday?
This was really the highlight. You know, some people are calling this the peanut the squirrel election, the peanut the squirrel landslide. A lot of people in China are actually wearing squirrel masks in solidarity with Peanut. So some people say, some very smart people are saying, that Peanut might have made a guest appearance, the spirit of Peanut, at Kamala's concession speech. So let's see. We can't venture that far out. We don't want to get over our skis. We'll let you be the judge.
There he is.
Looks a lot like Peanut. That looks like Peanut.
Little black squirrel behind the podium.
Yeah.
The November
Looks
surprise.
like Peanut. That
Yes.
is the November surprise. Peanut the squirrel's revenge.
Yeah.
As they're calling it. So, yeah. Hey, man. Peanut lives.
Peanut lives. That's right. Peanut the squirrel making his impact. And yeah, it's a black squirrel running across, just like, a black cat running, right? Crosses your path. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, for that next pro-Palestine march I go to, I'm going to have a flag of Palestine and a flag of Peanut.
And a flag of Peanut the squirrel. That's right.
Yep.
That's the most memorable moment from Kamala Harris's
It really
concession
was.
speech yesterday.
It really was. This is one of the hardest parts of commenting on politics as your gig. Sometimes the speech is so empty and meaningless, very much like Kamala itself, that you just can't focus. Like I wasn't even able to, my mind kept wandering every 10 seconds. I would try to zone in.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what do I have to get at the store? I couldn't stay with it.
That's like me trying to read a book. I read a few paragraphs.
That's what you say. That's crazy. So do audiobooks work for you, or do you?
They do. They work a little better. They work a little better. But yeah, long form reading is hard because my mind wanders. My mind wanders when I read, and so it doesn't bother you really if it's like an article or something short form because 2 or 3 restarts you get through the whole thing. But yeah, for books, it is really, really difficult to finish a book cover to cover for that reason.
So like Moby Dick, no way.
Yeah, no way. No way. Biden made a speech today from the Rose Garden, and people said he looked happier than ever. He looked happier. He looked probably, really chill. I watched the first few minutes of that. I think it was only 7 minutes, but I watched it. But no, man, I mean, you look at just, it's hard to look at a Democrat and not laugh at this point. I mean, Trump is back. They'd have been better off just letting him win in 2020. This way they'd be done with him.
Some have been making that point.
Like now you just drag the Trump era out by 4 years, right? Because now this is just Trump with Biden as the intermission. They could have just gotten it over with, and that would have been everything. Mike Pence is probably beatable in a general election. It's very hard to win the third term as the incumbent, right? Very hard, especially with a guy like Mike Pence who's really kind of bleh. Right, so let's say Trump won in 2020, you'd have probably beaten Pence with somebody. So there you go. It'd be blue skies right now. Instead,
Trump
you got
Trump definitely is the kind of guy who might have pulled an Obama on him though, and said, "Yeah, this isn't the right cycle for you, Mike."
I don't know, man. There wouldn't have been no next in line.
I got my eye on that Vance guy. He's full of beans.
Yeah. No, Vance couldn't have made it. It would have been tough I don't know who would have made it without Trump's blessing. I don't think anybody could have made it without Trump's blessing. They don't exactly have the deepest benches over there either. Yeah.
By all accounts, he was never close with them.
But who would he have blessed? Who would he have picked?
It's impossible to know.
Yeah, it's hard to know. You don't really know.
Because you don't know what that would have done to the whole political landscape if he had done a second term.
Yeah.
Who that would have elevated, who didn't get elevated because he wasn't there to elevate them. Well, maybe Herschel Walker would have been.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Dr. Oz and Herschel Walker would have run jointly.
Yeah,
that would have been something. Okay, well, let's get right into things, folks. Please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. Hit that follow button over on Rumble, please, and thank you very much. So Donald Trump doing a lot of winning this week. Not only did he win re-election, but he got another big win courtesy of the Justice Department. DOJ moving to wind down Trump criminal cases before he takes office. The step complies with long-standing Justice Department policy that a sitting president can't be prosecuted. 2 people familiar with the matter told NBC News. Justice Department officials have been evaluating how to wind down the 2 federal criminal cases against President-elect Donald Trump before he takes office to comply with long-standing department policy that a sitting president can't be prosecuted. 2 people familiar with the matter tell NBC News. The latest discussions stand in contrast with the pre-election legal posture of special counsel Jack Smith. Yeah, who do you think he voted for? Who in recent weeks took significant steps in the election interference case against Trump without regard to the electoral calendar. But the sources say DOJ officials have come to grips with the fact that no trial is possible anytime soon, in either the January 6th case or the classified documents matter, both of which are mired in legal issues that would likely prompt an appeal all the way to the Supreme Court, even if Trump had lost the election. Think about that. Think about, like, after January 6th, after the documents case, after the impeachments, after the Russia this, after the what's her name? What the hell's the woman's name? That's very disrespectful to forget her name. The one who said he grabbed her in a dressing room somewhere. I don't even remember her name.
Carol?
Carol.
E. Jean Carroll.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
This
How
is
can
why
we forget her name? There's going to be a statue over in Central Park before this is all over.
This is why our audience is 14.5% female, folks. Yes. But after all of that, he's back, man. He is back.
I mean, to be fair, the online audience skews that way, doesn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. That's our story anyway. Now that Trump will become president again, yes, DOJ officials see no room to pursue either criminal case against him and no point in continuing to litigate them in the weeks before he takes office, the people said. Sensible, inevitable, and unfortunate, said former federal prosecutor Chuck Rosenberg, an NBC News contributor. That slogan, also the new official motto of the Barack Obama Presidential Library. Sensible, inevitable, unfortunate. A user's guide to the 21st century. The DOJ's thinking on Trump's federal cases flows from a 2000 memo by the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel, which affirmed a Watergate-era conclusion that a prosecution of a sitting president would unduly interfere in a direct or formal sense with the conduct of the presidency. Well, that was very well timed, since that took place just before 9/11 and just before George Bush would go on to pursue numerous horrific crimes. That was a total coincidence, obviously, that it came out a year before 9/11. Obviously, they had no foresight of what was to come. That's just crazy talk. In light of the effect that an indictment would have
9/11 was safe and effective.
That's right. In light of the effect that an indictment would have on the operations of the executive branch, an impeachment proceeding is the only appropriate way to deal with a president while in office, the memo concluded, quoting the earlier conclusion. The practical reality, here's the money quote, the practical reality of Trump's electoral victory Tuesday is that he is unlikely to ever face legal consequences in relation to the serious federal crime charges brought against him by career Justice Department prosecutors working with career FBI agents.
We'll rally, stand up, be American.
There you go. That's the bottom line right there. And Fox News has some reporting that Jack Smith is apparently going to resign his post before Inauguration Day. This is not finalized yet, but here is reporting from Fox on this.
About Special Counsel Jack Smith. We have some news about Special Counsel Jack Smith, this man right here. Donald Trump said recently that he would fire Jack Smith, quote, within 2 seconds of taking office. Well, we found out that he may not have that opportunity. The reason is that the Department of Justice, where Jack Smith works, cannot prosecute a sitting president. Fox News is told that Jack Smith will be gone from his post as special counsel, meaning the cases will be gone before Trump takes the oath of office at noon on January 20th. This is the documents case, though that was dropped already by Judge Eileen Cannon back over the summer, and it's on appeal, but also this case for Trump's alleged efforts to try to overturn the 2020 election. So given the fact DOJ policy says you cannot prosecute a sitting president, expect Jack Smith's cases to be done. The last case, and I'll end on this, is that Atlanta case that deals with the 2020 elections. That's a local Georgia case. We've seen over the last year how that has played out with Fonnie Willis, Nathan Wade. That has many problems, many different delays. So the bottom line for my story to all of you right now, Donald Trump's legal problems have essentially all gone away since he won last night. Harris.
There you have it. No more cases means no more Jack Smith at his post. And Donald Trump in the clear. You know, we talked in the last show about the very unpleasant task that stands before us now to try and use this moment to red pill some libs out of lib world.
Yeah.
I can't imagine this doesn't go a long way towards doing some of that work for us. I mean, look at the airtime devoted to these criminal cases against Trump. I mean, before the campaign really heated up, like before it became general election season, because there was no Democratic primary, this was really the talk of lib world for like an entire year, basically, from like mid 2023 to mid 2024.
Well, that was where we got the cowbell left thing.
Yeah, that was the cowbell left. Exactly. That was in April 2023. So what I say, yeah, mid 2023 to mid 2024. Yeah, exactly. Starting with the arraignment in New York, which was spring of last year. That took up a lot of the oxygen. I would argue most of the oxygen in like very Democrat circles until the campaign started. And again, just all for absolutely nothing. Not only nothing, they didn't even really make a campaign issue out of it. I mean, how many ads did you see of Donald Trump being convicted as a felon? Very few, a little bit, but not much.
I mean, a lot of the press would hit on 34 felonies. They would hit on that.
But very little compared to what you would think they would try and like very little hay out of that compared to what you might think.
It felt like they were trying until like the last week or so when she did the ellipse speech. They were trying not to do the Hillary campaign. It seems like they were conscious of the fact that she leaned too heavily into disqualifying Trump and not enough into qualifying herself.
Right.
So I think that's why they didn't hit that as much as you might have thought they would. But in their closing argument, they went all in on January 6th. I mean, they gave her closing speech at the same site.
That's right. You watched that one. I didn't, because we covered it on Jimmy's show.
I did watch that one. And as I said, at the time, that's about as good a speech as I've ever seen Kamala Harris give. She's effective when she's rehearsed, prepared, scripted. As soon as you take the script away from her, off into the stratosphere. The concession speech she gave, it was competent. It was just boring to watch. She gave the libs their little dog whistles of, and we are conceding the election. Supposed
that means
Trump and Trump's
wouldn't
people. It is interesting, and a lot of our coverage tonight, including the View coverage that we're going to do on Rumble, touches on this. It's fascinating. This is why I try not to burn my lib listening posts, because there are things about their conversations you're just not going to pick up from the trending tweets.
Right.
Like just knowing people who are not high profile and just listening to what they say amongst themselves. At first, there was just the shock. Oh, I'm in such grief. I'm in mourning. There was that. And then now you're seeing this kind of oscillation between trying to look at what was wrong with Kamala and what's wrong with the Democratic Party. And, there's a little bit of conversation about the Bernie thing, not with the rank and file libs, though. But what you're seeing is they're going back to their comfort zone. Overall, there's this moment where they might have thought about it, but they're going back to, she lost because she's a woman. She lost because she's a woman. There's no other reason. What possible reason could there be beyond that for a candidate that nobody voted for in a primary? Of course it's because she's a woman. There could be inflation, wrong track numbers, terrible, verge of World War III. But what reason could there be other than her being a woman? And what's really interesting is they're not saying racism all that much, a little bit. They're mostly leaning into the sexism because too many brown people voted for Trump. Like they know that they can't say that without that being thrown back in their face. So they're really leaning into that she's a woman.
I mean, with a wave election, which you could safely call this a wave election, there's never 1, 2, or 3 things. There's not even a list of 5 things that you can say, but for this, it would have gone the other way. It was such a sweeping victory that you really have to look back and tell the story of how you got there. And the story of how you got there really begins with Barack Obama failing to deliver justice for the perpetrators of the financial crisis, failing to end the wars he promised to end, and failing to deliver that broad-based economic empowerment that he promised. So that's one story arc of the failure of Obama, both during his presidency and then his clinging to power in his post-presidency.
Well, and I think in hindsight,
arc,
that's going to be very clear to historians. I think that is the way this whole period will be viewed.
Absolutely.
That there was a tremendous opportunity for the left to form a pretty enduring majority, and Obama just lit it on fire.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, there's that story arc, and then the second story arc is kind of a subset of the first one, which is the systematic destruction of the Bernie Sanders movement, which could have come after the Obama movement if they allowed it to. Right? In a sense, those are one story. It's kind of one story with a slight spin-off. But that's the story. And there are not 1, 2, or 3 moments in that story that you could really point to. It's all of a piece. Who did Obama elevate as president? Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. He gave Hillary Clinton Secretary of State for no reason. He was under no obligation to do that. He owed her nothing. He blew her out in the primary. She ran a racist campaign against him. He did not have to give her any kind of post in his administration whatsoever. It was ridiculous. And he made Biden his VP for opportunistic reasons because he wanted to have a white sort of beer drinker on the ticket so that the Midwest was comfortable voting for a black man. Yeah. Right. He put him on there because he's a white racist.
Yeah.
They became your next 2 nominees. Neither of them had any real business running for president. The only reason Biden won was because of a fluke pandemic that really upended everything, and Trump just pretended it wasn't happening. So that created a vacuum for Biden to win once. But Biden was too old to run again, and so the VP pick was very important. Who he chose for vice president is very important because all the Democrats have is identity politics. He promised a woman. Because the Democratic establishment wanted Kamala in 2020, he figured he'll give it to her. That set you up for a nightmare worst-case scenario where he has a meltdown a few months before the election. You got no choice but to give her the ball. She was in no position to finish the game, and she couldn't do it. I mean, that is a whole narrative of fuck-ups. It was over a decade of bad decision after bad decision after bad decision. You can't point to one thing and say, I mean, even if you think there's sexism, or you can't point to one thing, oh, it's because she's a woman. Oh, because she's this, that. This was not, oh, if 1 or 2, 3 things had been different, we'd have won. No, you were nowhere close. And the reason you were nowhere close is because of almost 20 years of consistent and deliberate failure. I would argue. Deliberate failure. They destroyed the Bernie movement on purpose, which we'll get to later.
Right. Which is why anyone, we knew this was going to happen when we made predictions. Some people can't separate predictions from wishes.
Yeah.
We come out of the Bernie movement. The only people who perhaps derive as much pleasure from this as actual Trump supporters are former Bernie supporters who Dem exited.
Right.
Like we take more pleasure in it because this is a bone-deep vindication, going back to a series of betrayals that we're never really going to get over. Frankly, we're always going to be angry about 2016 and 2020. So when we see a result like this, we hear Chuck Schumer saying, for every blue-collar worker we lose, we're going to pick up 2 Republicans in the suburbs. We think of every lib thinking that Hillary was going to win, who gleefully told us we don't need you, who gleefully told us, well, you're just going to be left behind then. You can get on board or you can get left behind. That's when this happens. When this happened, every person who, after the Democratic Party, cheated to make Hillary the nominee, and then in 2020, Obama did his Monday Night Massacre right before Super Tuesday to knock Bernie out of contention. We look at this, and it's vindication of everything we said, because we said, I think, speaking for myself, I can speak for millions of others, we said, long term, you're not going to be able to win without us. You have lost the next logical evolution of the party. You've lost a generation by doing this. And that's exactly what happened. 2020 was a fluke. Trump would have won again.
Of course. In a crisis, people flock to a leader. They flock to authority. Trump would have gotten 100 million votes if he didn't pretend the crisis wasn't happening, which is what he did. He didn't want to deal with it. That's why Fauci lasted as long as he did. Trump wanted nothing to do with it, so he did not strike people as a leader.
Right.
That's why they voted for Biden, because they say we gotta rally behind somebody, and this guy's pretending that we're not walking around with masks and like.
What are you talking about? I like COVID. I put COVID on my hot dog with fucking mustard.
Yeah,
I'm fine.
But other than that, I mean, absent that, of course Trump would have won. Of course Trump would have won in a landslide that year. And I think most
was
people
just a
in the
little
party knew
COVID
that.
fluke.
Yeah.
And now look what happened in the next election. The Democrats decided to just take democracy out of their party entirely.
Right.
They decided they were going to nominate Hillary 2 years before the primaries. And they did not care what their voters wanted, emphatically. Not only did they not care what their voters wanted, they shamed and abused the voters who supported Sanders.
Right.
Bernie bros, right? The majority were women, but we were all Bernie bros. His coalition was majority non-white, but we're all Bernie bros. All the media smearing us as racists and sexists. Come on, man. You lost. Look how much passion we have for politics. We have so much passion for politics. We fell ass backwards into being professional political commentators.
Right.
This was like, when we started out, it was a form of activism.
Right.
That's how much passion we have for it, because we worked so hard at it, we accidentally succeeded at it. We never really set out to do that. All that passion could have been inside the Democratic Party.
Yep.
And instead, it's all outside the party.
Yep. That's correct. 100%. Kenman G, the stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Libs have now reached the depression stage. Once they hit acceptance, change will be possible. Good analysis, Kenman G. Appreciate that. Hillary Hinton says all the cool kids, DD, JD, Taibbi, Greenwald, Hedges, Jose, Kit et al. should join forces and start a new third party. Kidding. Not fucking kidding. Discuss. Look, I mean, I like the idea of new parties and stuff, but I am of the opinion right now, and I've been of this opinion for a while, but when you see a result like Jill Stein at 0.4%, you have to, and this is what Shama said, you can't start at let's have a new party, because it's just too hard to impact the electoral space absent a foundation. So I think Workers Strike Back is a great place to start. That is a workers' movement. Out of that may arise a party, and I think that's where you have to go. But I do think, I mean, look, we're doing election analysis this week because this is the week to do it, but you really have to think beyond electoralism for these next few years, I think, because this is not going to happen. Look, Trump, this election was such a thumping, it's going to take a while at this point to impact the electoral space with a movement of workers, because Trump just won too many of them. He's won too many of them. Like at this point, like until he's gone.
This is what we were warning about in 2016, that if you don't satisfy this demographic, they're going to go to Trump.
Exactly.
If you don't give them populism from the left, what do you think they're going to go for? What you're offering? Hillary? No, they're going to go to populism on the right. They're going to go to the next closest thing.
Exactly. And like, we're not MAGA. We're not joining Trump. Those politics are not our politics. We've been very emphatic about that, to the dismay of section of the audience. And so where does that leave you? Well, in terms of electoral politics, it leaves you nowhere. And you have to just be honest about that. And so I think the next step here is really organizing outside of that space, and then potentially down the road using that as a jumping off point into that space. Maybe. We'll see how that goes. Tried locals, didn't get laid, never going back again. Thanks, Kevin G. Appreciate that. Thanks for sharing. And sorry to hear that. Eric Rousseau says, since democracy was lost on Election Day, how are you two Jews holding up? Well, you've seen us, man. We've been on the air about half of our waking lives since Election Day. So this is it.
Taking what they're given because we're working for a living.
Exactly. What you see is what you get. Do it okay. A. Hamilton, single lib chicks are owning conservatives by telling them they are going to withhold sex until marriage because of the election result. LOL. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I get it. I'd make a joke there, but I've been asked to hold off on that for, every few episodes. So, JM, thanks for the $2 and the thumbs up. So where we're going, we don't need women. Shout out to Keaton. Long form reading is a chore. Knowledge gathering through other means. There you go. Thanks, Foment. I like that. Foment Dissident. I like that screen name. Kate, please invite Link Lauren on. I like his coverage. Before we knew who Link Lauren was, when we saw his Breaking Points interview.
Oh, right. Yeah.
We were covering him.
He called in to us, right?
Yeah, we were covering the Breaking Point segment. Apparently, one of Link's friends messaged him and say, hey, you're being covered on some podcast. Then he
called in. Yeah,
posted in the chat, hey, can I call in? So we emailed him a link, and he called in one night. Yeah, so we have talked to him. I don't think
when we were like a really small channel then too.
Yeah, I mean I don't know if we were tiny. I forget when that was.
Like 5,000.
Yeah, something like that. We were pretty small. And he might remember us because it was just kind of this weird thing where he did an impromptu call. So he probably does remember who we are actually. But yeah, that'd be fun. Kate says, has there been any talk about how to avenge Peanut and Fred? Seems like massive weaponization. Maybe there should be a tax strike in New York.
I think we did on Tuesday.
Yeah, there you go. Yes. The country had his back.
The country avenged them.
Exactly.
I mean, if there is one thing that could have changed the outcome, it would have been leaving that fucking squirrel alone.
Yeah, that could have been. That would have been a very good idea, actually. Declaring independence, that's Jose Vega, says Weiss Dobular 26. Yeah, good call, Jose.
Yeah,
that might be something. Oh, speaking of Jose, here.
The only year we could win would be the year there's no election.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Speaking of Jose, here, I got something I want to show from Jose Vega. He tweeted this out. What's next for the Vega for Congress campaign? Join us this Saturday to discuss. If you need a ride up, call the number to RSVP. So for those of you who are in the New York area or around the New York area, Jose is holding an event at the FDR Library, Museum, and Home in beautiful Hyde Park, New York. I used to guide some tour groups on those grounds. We took them to those grounds. I never worked for the library, but I've been there a few times. I took tour groups there.
Well, you must have gone inside, though.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's a really, really great place to spend a morning or an afternoon. Beautiful grounds, beautiful locale. Cool. The FDR home is really cool. I've never actually been through the library. The tours would go in, and I would just wait and gather people near the buses. But it is great. It's a great place to go, and you can go and be part of this rally here. So there's the phone number, 800-498-8561. To RSVP. I believe it's at 11 a.m. There was an updated slide of this, which was a little pixelated, so I used this one. So Saturday, November 9th, this Saturday, 11 a.m. at the FDR home in Hyde Park, 800-498-8561.
I just want them to when everyone gets there, just busts out a Scarface speech. First you get the money, then you get the power.
Yeah,
then you get the power, then you get the woman.
All right, cool.
I'm throwing you pearls, Jose. I'm throwing you pearls. With that opener, you can't go wrong. You'll have the crowd in the palm of your hand.
That's right. In the palm of your hand, Jose. Can't go wrong with that. All righty. Let's move on here. All right, folks. In keeping with our post-election analysis here, we warned you, Arab Americans in Michigan, tell Kamala Harris. So the big winner in Dearborn, Michigan was actually Donald Trump, because Trump got 45% of the vote, and then you had Jill Stein take a lot of votes from Kamala Harris. I know the Greens are too shy to put it that way. I don't know why. But yes, Jill Stein ate into Kamala's vote count quite a bit. So they definitely made an impact in Dearborn on Election Day. When Fox News called Pennsylvania for Donald Trump in the early hours of Wednesday, all but confirming that he would be the next president of the United States, there were a handful of Arab activists left at a watch party in Dearborn, Michigan. Genocide is bad politics, said one attendee at the event, which had Palestinian and Lebanese flags hanging outside its doors. As the reality of another Trump presidency set off anger and sorrow from many Democratic commentators, at the Arab American gathering, there was a sense of indifference, if not vindication. Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris had ignored the community's calls for reconsidering the unconditional U.S. support for Israel. The vice president also continued to assert what she calls Israel's right to defend itself despite the brutal atrocities in Gaza and Lebanon. If you ask, well, which American outlet is printing this? None. This is, of course, Al Jazeera. Activist Adam Abu Salah said part of the reason why Harris lost was her decision to side with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the expense of alienating the Democratic base, Arab and Muslim Americans, as well as young people and progressives. It's not our fault. They cannot vilify our community, Abu Salah said. We've been warning the Democrats for over a year now, and the Democrats continue to downplay what's going on. He added that Harris's main message to the Arab community was to warn of the dangers of a Trump presidency. This tactic failed to work as voters in the area were laser focused on the continuing war in the Middle East that affected many of them personally. In the Arab-majority suburb of Dearborn, anger over Israel's U.S.-backed assault on Gaza and Lebanon was tangible at the ballot box. Harris lost the city to Trump by more than 2,600 votes. President Joe Biden beat Trump by more than 17,400 votes. So that is a 20,000 vote swing that helped the Republican former president reclaim Michigan. Now, what did we say in the previous segment? This was such a wave that you can't point to any one thing and say, aha, but for that, you'd have won. But this did put a dent in her total. Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein, who centered opposition to the war in her platform, also performed relatively well in the city, growing her party support from 207 votes in 2020, great showing for Howie Hawkins there, to more than 7,600 this year. Hussein Dabaheh, I don't know how you would say that, a Lebanese-American political consultant in the Detroit area, noted that Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, a Democrat, significantly outperformed Harris in Dearborn, receiving more than 9,600 votes than the vice president. The Arab community said, we're anti-genocide. We supported the candidates that supported the community, and we stood against the candidates that stood against the community, Dabaheh told Al Jazeera. It is unclear what a Trump presidency will mean for Arab and Muslim Americans and the country at large. I hope it's something good. I hope the country comes together. I hope Democrats are brought to their senses, Dabaheh said. While the former president has a long history of anti-Muslim and anti-immigrant statements and policies, he has promised to bring peace to the region. Trump also softened his antagonistic tone towards Arab and Muslims as he courted their communities in Michigan. Yeah, before we go on, I want to put a little bit of a marker there. What did we say in the closing week or so of the campaign? That Trump, in going on the Joe Rogan show, in bringing the Muslim leaders on the stage, he looked like he was working his ass off to win. Right.
He looked like he wanted the job. He didn't look. See, this is what's funny, because you put on Trump, he's this trust fund billionaire, which he is. But he did not read like he was taking anything for granted. He did not read like he assumed he had a right to the job. He seemed like he was campaigning. He seemed like he was asking you for your vote.
And he was campaigning to expand his coalition. Young men don't typically vote. Young people tend to vote blue. So I'll go on the Joe Rogan podcast and see if I can win over some young men. Muslims and Arabs tend to vote overwhelmingly Democratic. He sensed a major vulnerability this time, which he was correct to sense that vulnerability. And he thought, hey, why not bring some of these Muslim leaders on stage at a rally? Like, let's actually grow the base and expand the tent. What did Kamala Harris do? The exact opposite. She campaigned around Michigan with Liz Cheney. Her final pitch, and by final pitch, I don't just mean the last week. I mean the last month of the campaign, was exclusively targeting the suburban, independent, conservative, sort of Lincoln Project type voter. That was her exclusive pitch at the expense of everyone else.
Yep.
And look, the reason I predicted that it would succeed. And like I said there was less than 60% chance. I wasn't confident in this prediction, but it was my prediction. I own it. I thought there was a greater than 50 chance she would succeed because I thought that's what the electorate would look like. I sensed a lot more despair and indifference than actually existed. I didn't think this would be a wave election. I thought the country is tired. They're over it. They've just thrown their hands up in the air and said, fuck it. That wasn't the case. Turns out these appeals that Trump made to these different groups worked. It rallied them. And they turned out in numbers that overcame Kamala's numbers, which were not terrible in the swing states. This is the other thing. The reason the Republicans won the popular vote is because in very blue states like Illinois and New Jersey and even New York, you had red surges that made those states closer than they should have been. Trump lost Illinois by like 4 points. He lost New Jersey by 6 points. He lost New York by 11 points. He's supposed to win New York by 20. Illinois and New York are high population states, and so those numbers are what pad the popular vote. They are what explain a lot of these demographic inroads that he made. But in the swing states, like Pennsylvania, for example, Kamala Harris won Philadelphia by north of 400,000 votes. Conventional wisdom says you're supposed to win Pennsylvania if you can clear a 400,000 vote margin in Philly. Not all the time. Not when they show up as well. It turns out Trump beat him. He had the numbers to beat him. And part of why he got those numbers up was by doing the kinds of outreach that this article just talked about, which Kamala actively refused to do. She refused to do it. She pushed them out so that she can get the conservative women in. That was a bargain that ended up being a loser. And I'll eat shit. I thought it was going to work. I thought there was enough despair in the country that was going to work, but there wasn't. And Trump actually wound up gaining with suburban women. Like that, I personally would never have seen coming. I would never have seen that coming, that he was actually going to gain with suburban women. We can only really speculate on why that is. Certainly, it seemed like their pitch was tailor-made. I mean, it was tailor-made for that audience. They thought, hey, they vote in greater numbers, which is what we thought too. Well, yeah, they're going after a demographic that even if they lose some minority support in the working class, they're making it up with a larger demographic. So even if they only pick up 2 points there, it'll outweigh losing maybe 10 points in a smaller segment of the population. Did not work out that way because he actually gained with the demographic that they went all in on. That is where you have to get into, okay, there's economics, but maybe obviously the abortion issue did not have the potency with that audience that they expected. Part of that might be that a lot of those people, they're going to be able to get an abortion either way. You know, back in the day when abortion was illegal, people used to go to Puerto Rico if they had money. You know, people of that class are not as personally affected by that. So that could be part of it. In terms of young men, I've been saying this for as long as we've had the show. Men in general and white men in particular are a very large voting bloc. Building your brand around hating men, well, what did you think the long-term political ramifications of that were going to be? Did you really think that presenting the argument that that masculinity is toxic and we need more feminized, castrated men, and if you don't fit that mold, you're toxic? What did you think was going to happen? Of course they ran to a gorilla like Trump who pounds his chest. Of course they did. Of course they did. You've had this ongoing, very blatant war against white people generally, against masculinity specifically. Like, hey, man, did you think that all men are like the castrated libs that you knew at Barnard? Is that what you thought? That all men were going to go, yeah, you know, we really need to tone down the testosterone. It's really not good. Did you think that's how most men were going to react to being talked to that way? Like, you were begging to lose a generation of men, and you did. You did. It took a little while for it to really set in, but this election is where you really saw the impact of that. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that, too. I think a lot of that is inseparable from economics. Like I said, I believe that is what really dictates a lot of these trends.
But if
You
you
know.
cared about economics, you probably would not speak in that way to a demographic. You just wouldn't even present yourself like that.
Yeah, but I think it's born mostly of that. He brought Arab and Muslim officials and imams to the stage during his rallies and called them great people. Trump also visited Dearborn and listened firsthand to demands to end the war, which Harris failed to do. Ali Al-Farjala, a 32-year-old Iraqi-American real estate agent in Dearborn, said that for all his flaws, Trump represents a change from the Biden-Harris administration that has been unflinchingly supporting the Israeli assault on Gaza and Lebanon. He stressed that the election is not the end of political engagement, saying that the community will press Trump to deliver on his promise of bringing peace to the region. It doesn't stop here, Al-Farjala told Al Jazeera. We have to work to make sure our issues are heard, to stop the genocide in Gaza, stop the invasion of South Lebanon, and let Palestine have its own state. We're hopeful about that. That's our number one priority for this community. He also said that Harris supporters' lesser of two evils pitch to the community backfired because many voters could not see a worse evil than the administration providing the bombs that were killing their families and destroying their hometowns. Well, what did we say? It was exactly pretty much word for word how we've been framing that the whole time. And we've been taking our cues from them. So no surprise there, obviously. While both major candidates back Israel, the Harris campaign committed a series of unforced errors that further alienated the community in Michigan and beyond, Arab American advocates told Al Jazeera. So, just to look at the damage, Dearborn, Michigan, 2020, Biden 88, Trump 11. Final result here, Trump 43, Harris 36, Stein 18. So you talk about a swing, and talk about the disloyalty of the Democratic Party, too. I mean, you talk about, it's not just that they take workers for granted or they take certain groups for granted. You talk about a group that's been taken for granted. They make a lot of noise about how they take the black vote for granted. What about the Muslim and Arab vote? Look at that, 88%. And don't forget, Michigan was a swing state last time. 88-11. You don't think, hey, they represent a key voting block for me, so maybe I should try and slow this genocide down? No. Mm-hmm. The hell with them. That was what the Democrats' attitude towards them was. We'll bring Liz Cheney to Michigan. And boom, there you have it. Trump 43, Harris 36,
Liz
Stein
Cheney,
18.
that is the way to win them back. It is very typical of liberal class politics on the whole. They like gestures. They like to go protest at the airport. Oh, the Muslim ban, this is terrible. But when it comes to doing anything that might cost them something like AIPAC money,
right,
then they don't really give a fuck about you. It is a party, it is a movement, it is a politics of empty gestures, complete lack of substance. Now, whether you like Trump, don't like him, like his policies, don't like his policies, there's substance there. They're not lying. They're not kidding. They actually mean all that shit. If you like it, you're voting for something that actually reflects what you like. With the Democrats, if you're actually on the left, what are you getting? Nothing.
Yep.
Gestures. Kente cloth.
And, of course, Dearborn results, Trump +7, Rashida Tlaib +32. She ended up doing, of course, very well. What did they say in the article? Those who support the community get support from the community. Those who don't. And there you have it. So Dearborn gets to tell Kamala Harris, we told you so, and they did. Now, I don't know which way to look at this, as a fortunate thing or an unfortunate thing. Unfortunately, what makes that story, I guess it's unfortunate, what makes that story a little bit less potent is the fact that Trump won by such wide margins anyway that, it's easier for the media to sort of ignore that because it didn't cost them Michigan, right? Because it wasn't close enough to cost them Michigan. But they did their part. I mean, they seemed to run up the numbers that they wanted to. By they, I mean the Green Party in Dearborn. Obviously, nationwide, even statewide, it was a failed campaign overall by the Greens. Shocker. But in Dearborn, they ran up numbers.
We never talked about that 5% shit.
No, of course
We've
not.
been there. 2016, after that, I said, okay, If they did not even get close to 5% that year, when would they?
Well, that part of the election I got down pretty well. I said they're not getting 5%. I'd be shocked if they got 2%. I'd be surprised if they got 1%. They got about 0.5%. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. All right. Let's take some more super chats and Rumble rants here, and then we will move on. Kenman G, if you want to laugh, see John Oliver's take on election prior to Election Day. He praises the uncommitted movement and is on the verge of tears with Trump derangement syndrome. Does he have where does he have his show on HBO still? Does he still do a weekly show? I didn't know that. I didn't even know that show was on. You never see
John Oliver? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I stopped watching him after his Jill Stein hit piece. Speaking of.
Yeah, I know, but I never even see any of his stuff around anymore.
He is. You don't have Max?
I don't have what? I have it, yeah, but I don't.
Yeah, you don't see it because it's on the homepage.
I never watch it
in season.
My kids watch it sometimes. Not John Oliver, but
I was gonna say what?
Yeah.
What are you doing to those kids?
Yeah. No, I'm not doing anything. My kids don't even know who the president is. They don't know anything about it. You know, they like good. Building shit.
Good.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
They should keep their innocence as long as they can.
Keep it that way.
Yeah. Andrew L479, thanks for the $5. Don't worry, the parliamentarian will stop Trump. There's nothing he can do about it. There you go.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
They should do segments about that on MSNBC. Siddhartha Vicious, did you see Greg Hatfield's deleted tweet? I did not. I did not. I'd ask you to share it with me. Maybe somebody screenshotted it, but no, I have not seen that. Nocturnal Human, we knew in 2016 Bernie was the end of the road for the left. I know I saw this coming 10 years ago. There is no more American left. Yet not organized in that way. Dan Richmond, the Motley Jew. Neoliberalism is ending globally. It cannot be stopped. It will be fascinating to see these Clinton apparatchiks at the DNC try and cling to power. I predict the next empty vessel will be Mayo Pete.
You think so? My theory, and I don't feel strongly about it because never underestimate the ability of the Democratic Party to just go after the money, no matter what the consequence. I would think the lesson they would take away from this, at the very least, is, hey, maybe we should go back to letting the voters have a say in who the nominee is.
You know,
I would imagine you'd get a competitive primary, and I don't think Mayo Pete would get through a competitive primary.
No, I don't think so either. The guy who they should try and get behind if they were smart would be that Richard Ojeda guy in West Virginia. Just because he signals Ojeda, very grubby. He's enough of a lib. He's enough of like a Trump deranged lib where they should be like okay with him. But, you know, he's convincing as a working class guy. You know, he was a Bernie to Trump guy in 2016 and now he works with Democrat PACs. I mean, he's a Democrat. He's really not great anymore. But, you know, he would be much better branding than Mayo Pete. For sure. Yeah. That's probably the best chance.
Although with what's going to be, because all of the working class energy has been sucked out of the party, now you're just down to the most rancid libs. Like now you're just down to the people who are stupid enough to read this fucking election as a referendum on Kamala Harris's vagina, which according to Willie Brown is fine.
Yeah.
So there's no reason that would have lost her the election in and of itself.
It comes recommended. Yeah.
It comes recommended. So you're down to people who are dumb enough to read this election that way. So who knows? Maybe Mayo Pete could get through. Like anyone with more sense than that is already gone. Forget about 4 years from now.
Yeah. FHL Tom, thanks for the $100. Let's have a cowbell for FHL Tom. That's very nice of you. Thank you, my friend. Russ, you don't have your ear on the ground. My shit-lib black family members say Trump won because of racism. The 15% of blacks who voted for him are house slaves. Wow, and the Latinos wanted to be white.
No, listen, man. I hear that. I hear that from shit-lib black people. Yes, I've heard that, sure. But generally, overall, let's put it this way. I hear that from black shit libs I know, not the white ones. The white ones are staying away from it because they can get it thrown back at them. If you're a black shit lib and you say that, I mean, you're not going to get any white people who are going to be like, no, it's not racist. They're going to be too intimidated to say that.
Right. Yeah,
but
that makes sense.
The white shit libs, they're staying away from but not entirely, but mostly they're leaning into the sexism part. Mostly.
Right. Eric Maines, thanks for the $10. Venero ends up in coin, not former President Snow in Hunger Games series finale for a reason. If Joy Reid saw it, her takeaway would be J-Law and white women failed voters and toxic men manipulated them. PSFJR. Thank you, Eric Maines. A nice Hunger Game analogy there. 007 Angelo says, Russell, preach 100%. Facts, revenge is sweet. LMAO. Declaring independence, 11 a.m. Yes, 11 a.m. this Saturday for Jose up in beautiful Hyde Park, New York. Sir,
is it true you get to ride around in his wheelchair?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's the VIP pass. Yeah. The Greens need to take ownership of the myth that they stole votes from Democrats. Yes, I agree with that. Thank you, Sir Bikes a lot. Adil Saeed, you guys reach out to Left Reckoning podcast, formerly Michael Brooks Show. They have the same take on Obama being the root of all issues. Oh, yeah. No, I haven't watched their show in a while.
We're actually, because I want to do a lot of video essays once this whole Michigas is over. We're talking about collaborating on a video essay about this subject.
Yeah, that'll be great. No, the producers of that show, were former Michael Brooks guys. And, I actually messaged them because, our politics are really not quite theirs, now. I think if Michael were alive, he'd have probably been radicalized a lot more by now. But those guys are not. But they got censored for a ridiculous reason. And so I messaged them a while back. Because, Russell calls me the YouTube savant. I'm pretty good at dodging the censors. So I was going to give them some free advice, but they don't really like us, so they never took me up on it. I was willing to set that aside. Hey, I hate censorship, so I'll stick up for anybody's right to free speech, whether they, whether I dig their vibe or not. But, radio silence. But I will check it out if you're recommending it. Thank you. For an object, thanks to the 1999, no coffee ads required today, gentlemen. I'm still satiated, peppy, and rock hard from the liberal tears. Bless the both of you. Thank you for an object. Appreciate that very much. Okay, let's keep going here. All right, folks. So here's kind of a big segment, and we're going to start it out with this piece of video here from a Case Study QB. Thanks, as always, for the work that you do, my friend. Leah Wright-Rigor says the results was the result of the Democrats never learning the lesson from 2016 and that Bernie Sanders will be important to convincing Dems to talk about bread and butter issues. So here she is on election night as the results were coming in.
Leftovers of the 2016 issues that the Democratic Party...
Sorry.
I think this is the leftovers of the 2016 kind of mess, that there were all of these issues that the Democratic Party saw laid out very clearly in 2016 after Hillary Clinton's loss, and that rather than address those issues, they moved and they migrated. What happened is that the pandemic, right? The pandemic came upon us, and Joe Biden happened to be the person for the pandemic. And I think they mistook that moment for a referendum on what the Democrats had to offer, rather than being introspective.
Okay, so that's kind of interesting. I mean,
I wonder what she's going to do for a job now.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean,
I cannot believe somebody was on CNN telling the truth like that.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would slightly quibble with is that, Biden being the man for the pandemic, I think any Democrat probably could have won given the pandemic and Trump's performance. Like the non-entity factor of Biden is what worked.
But the big picture, she's got it. Like,
she's got it. That they took that as
to Trump.
Exactly.
People pick Biden.
Right. They took that as validation of their worldview as opposed to a fluke where they got lucky. Yeah, absolutely.
See, we didn't need those Bernie bros, just like we said.
Right.
I'll tell you one other person who I think is going to be incredibly important. Actually, two other people. The first person is Bernie Sanders. One of the things that Bernie Sanders has been saying since at least 2014 has been about how the Democratic Party, if it wants to keep these coalitions, needs to talk about bread and butter issues. It needs to talk about politics. A lot of people attacked him for that, saying, well, are you saying that cultural politics don't matter? That's not what he was saying. He was saying we need to focus on these things. The other person is Stacey Abrams. We have not heard a lot from Stacey Abrams in this election cycle, but her organizations, particularly Fair Fight, the New Georgia Voter Project, and other organizations were instrumental in pulling together coalitions that ended up winning Joe Biden Georgia in 2020, but also Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin.
See, I don't know enough about that to comment on that. Where were they this year? I mean,
yeah, actually, I haven't even. This is the first I hear anyone even bring it up.
Yeah, like I don't know where she was this year. Did they have a falling out? There's something. But anyway, that's not really the point of the segment. On the Bernie front, yeah, obviously that's correct.
Probably working for a defense contractor now.
Yeah, exactly. And you had people talk about this on election night in 2016 when Hillary lost, that the ghost of Bernie Sanders looms large over this result. Well, here you have it one more time. Bernie tweets out November 6th, yesterday, "It should come as no great surprise that a Democratic Party which has abandoned working class people would find that the working class has abandoned them. While the Democratic leadership defends the status quo, the American people are angry and want change, and they're right." So I'll read this.
You know, it's really too bad we didn't have anybody who could have blown this party apart by running as an independent.
Yeah.
Too bad.
8 years ago. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. "It should come as no great surprise that a Democratic Party which has abandoned working class people would find that the working class has abandoned them. First, it was the white working class, and now it is Latino and black workers as well. While the Democratic leadership defends the status quo, the American people are angry and want change, and they're right. Today, while the very rich are doing phenomenally well, 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, and we have more income and wealth inequality than ever before. Unbelievably, real inflation accounted for weekly wages for the average American worker are actually lower now than they were 50 years ago. Today, despite an explosion in technology and worker productivity, many young people will have a worse standard of living than their parents, and many of them worry that AI and robotics will make a bad situation even worse. Today, despite spending far more per capita than other countries, we remain the only wealthy nation not to guarantee health care to all as a human right, and we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. We alone, among major countries, cannot even guarantee paid family and medical leave. Today, despite strong opposition from a majority of Americans, we continue to spend billions funding the extremist Netanyahu government's all-out war against the Palestinian people, which has led to the horrific humanitarian disaster of mass malnutrition and the starvation of thousands of children. With the big money interests and well-paid consultants who control the Democratic Party learn any real lessons from this disastrous campaign? Will they understand the pain and political alienation that tens of millions of Americans are experiencing? Do they have any ideas as to how we can take on the increasingly powerful oligarch which has so much economic and political power? Probably not. In the coming weeks and months, those of us concerned about grassroots democracy and economic justice need to have some very serious conversations, serious political discussions. Stay tuned. Okay, well, these discussions should include Bernie himself. These discussions should include the fact that, yes, he had the opportunity in 2016 to break away and take millions of people with him to actually get a new party off the ground. Like those opportunities come
he had the
come
juice.
Across once in a very long while, and he had the juice and could have done that. I don't think now he has the cachet to get it started, even if he wanted to, and that's the real tragedy.
Nobody trusts him anymore.
Right, because nobody trusts him anymore.
Who's going to get behind him? Who's going to get behind Bernie Sanders? Yeah. Why? So he can tell you have to vote for the Democrats?
Well, this is why no one trusts him here. So here, I hope our friend Jacob is watching this. Andre Damon from the World Socialist website says Bernie Sanders said 10 days ago that Biden has been the most progressive pro-worker president since FDR. Yep, 10 days ago. 10 days ago. Week before the election, his closing pitch is this.
President Biden, in many ways, I believe that President Biden, in many ways, has been the most progressive pro-worker president since FDR.
That's not what you're saying now.
That's not what you're saying now. Exactly. You were in good soldier mode, and this is why you couldn't get a third party off the ground now if you tried, because you've lost that trust. Well, you've also pissed the DNC chair, Jamie Harrison, who quote tweets Bernie and says, "This is straight up BS. Biden was the most pro-worker president of my lifetime." Now, to be fair, Bernie did say that himself.
Maybe that's a sad statement on the people who preceded him.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a leper with the most fingers contest. Was he more pro-worker than Obama? Sure. Obama was a guy that ignored the union workers, state workers striking in, what was it, Wisconsin?
Yeah, the teachers, yeah.
Completely ignored them. So, yeah, was he more pro-union than Obama? Obama was less pro-union than Reagan.
Yeah. Yep. Biden was the most pro-worker president of my lifetime, saved union pensions, created millions of good-paying jobs, and even marched in a picket line. Oh, yeah, he showed up to the UAW.
God bless him.
Yeah.
God bless him.
And some of MVP's plans would have fundamentally transformed the quality of life and closed the racial wealth gap for working people across this country. From the child tax credits, which he let expire without a fight, to $25K for a down payment on a house, which never came to be. That was a Kamala promise. That was not a Biden record.
Yeah.
To the cost of senior health care in their homes, these are a lot of post-election takes, and this one ain't a good one. It's actually one of the only good ones to come out of Democratic Party circles. Now, unfortunately, the messenger is flawed, to say the least, since he was saying what you're saying there, which is that Biden was the most pro-worker president of his lifetime.
That's what he's saying a week
10 days ago. Right, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. So all that criticism aside, the message itself is the only thing that has a prayer of saving the Democratic Party from irrelevance. And, credit where credit's due here.
But it's probably too late because that whole demographic has now been lured into Trump world. Exactly. And once people are branded, they're branded. Why you think Camel cigarettes, until they were forced not to, had a cartoon camel to get kids to start smoking Camels so they'd be branded for life. Now they're branded. You had an opportunity. These people could have been Democrats. Now they're Republicans, and you're going to have a hell of a time getting them to change their minds.
Well, you talk about people who the Democrats could have had. Crystal Ball writes this article for Drop Site News. Dems have spent the past 8 years destroying the one movement that could have saved them. Bernie's class-first populism won over exactly the type of voters, Latinos, working class, bros, Joe Rogan, that Dems now repel. Exactly. Look at how your numbers fell apart with Latinos and young men, specifically, Joe Rogan being the cherry on top since he endorsed Bernie 4 years ago and Trump now, and, of course, the working class, generally speaking. So, a segment from this article. The path not taken in 2016 looms larger than ever. Bernie's coalition was filled with the exact type of voters who are now flocking to Donald Trump, working class voters of all races, young people, and critically, the much derided bros. The top contributors to that's really the most glaring thing. I didn't even think of that, but that's actually a good point. Like, the bros are now Trump bros, whereas what did they call us? They called us bros. Like that was
bros.
Yeah,
Bernie
exactly.
Bros, right?
Like I didn't even put that together. It was kind of hidden in plain sight. So props to her for noticing that. I think it's a good point. The top contributors to Bernie's campaign often held jobs at places like Amazon and Walmart. The unions loved him. And never forget, he earned the coveted Joe Rogan endorsement that Trump also received the day before the election this year.
But right there, and this is where you have to blame Bernie. Under pressure, he didn't lean into it. He didn't embrace it.
Right. Exactly. They didn't want to tout that. They touted it a little bit. AOC made us think about it, and so they shut up about it. They didn't tout it as much after that. It turns out the Bernie to Trump pipeline is real. While that has always been used as an epithet to smear Bernie and his movement, that's interesting because you know who did kind of use that as an epithet just a couple months ago when you were shilling for Kamala's? You, Crystal Ball. Yeah, Tulsi backs Trump. Is the Bernie to Trump pipeline real? They use that as a negative. So I just have to kind of point that out here. Anyway, I digress. Back to the article. While that has always been used as an epithet to smear Bernie and his movement, with the implication that social democracy is just a cover for or gateway drug to right-wing authoritarianism, the truth is that this pipeline speaks to the power and appeal of Bernie's vision as an effective antidote to Trumpism. When these voters had a choice between Trump and Bernie, they chose Bernie. For many of them, now that the choice is between Trump and the dried-out husk of neoliberalism, they're going to Trump. Once again, if that's how you felt about it, then why'd you make this little video basically trashing the Bernie to Trump pipeline? Not as much empathy during campaign season, I suppose. That explains it. But here are some numbers. Okay, so this is Jeff Stein for the Washington Post. Put out this breakdown.
Never let the truth get in the way of podcast fighting.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Staggering class realignment shift in working class. Harris lost despite major shift of affluent voters her way. Now, another way to phrase that is she lost because of a major shift in affluent voters her way. Perhaps she lost because she targeted well-to-do, affluent conservative independents to the exclusion of working class people of all racial and ethnic and religious backgrounds. But here are some really startling figures here. So in 2020, Trump wins voters over 100K, 54 to 42. That must have been a typo on his part. 2024, Harris wins voters over 100K, 54 to 45. That's pretty amazing that Trump lost the rich vote this year. I mean, the Republican never loses the rich vote. Even back when Trump was making inroads with working class people, the Republicans were still, on a whole, the party of the rich more than the Democrats were. They still won with rich people.
That was a point Democrats kept making when you made a class argument about Trump, ignoring the fact that just because he wasn't winning that class didn't mean he wasn't making inroads with that class, clearly. But they would say, well, no, but he won the people making more than $100,000 a year.
Right.
So what do you have to say now?
Now you can't say that. Now this was the only demographic that skewed Democrat were the rich. In 2020, Biden wins voters 50K to 100K, meaning middle-class voters, although that's not a middle-class income anymore with inflation, but 57 to 42. In 2024, Trump wins voters 50 to 100K, 49-47. In 2020, Biden wins voters under 50,000 by 10 points, 55-45. In 2024, Trump, massive improvement with voters who make under 50,000 a year, 49 to 48. You had Donald Trump defeating Kamala Harris among those at the low rung of the income ladder. Those are astounding numbers. And that shows you why this was a wave. This was a wave. Yep. These are nationwide numbers. This is not in one or two states or a swing this or that. This is nationwide numbers. You have Democrats winning the rich. You have Republicans winning the middle class, the working class. It doesn't demark any line lower than 50K. But let's face it. In this inflation environment, anything under 50K, that is essentially a poverty wage. If you're doing less than 50K in 2024 with eggs being $5 a dozen or whatever, I mean that is brutal. That is damning. That is absolutely damning. So Chris Cuomo pushes back a little bit against Maxine Waters when she tries to blame this on the fact that Kamala was a black woman and that America didn't want to vote for a black woman. He pushes back a little bit on this. Let's see this.
A lesson that your party should have learned. Well, the Democratic.
Sorry.
What is the lesson that your party should have learned?
Well, the Democratic Party worked very hard. And they raised, substantial sum of money. We had great candidates. And so Trump had a following, basically generally led by whites. White males voted in big numbers. He had a few from the other race groups that joined in, like the Latinos at 45%, and black men at about the same rate that they did when they voted for him before, at about 20%. That combination won. And so it is not that Democrats did not work hard, did not do a great job. We had an unusual situation where we had a black woman, which this country has never seen before. A combination of all of those things led to his win.
I will not push back on the idea that race and sex matter in American politics. I think they do. I don't know that it was the controlling variable, and you don't suggest otherwise. To me, it seemed to be that the Democrats thought Trump stinks is enough. And Senator Bernie Sanders said something that reminded me of you, which is why I wanted you on the show tonight, Maxine, which is Democratic Party used to be, we are all about doing for working people. That's what we do. That's what Mario Cuomo's party, that's what Maxine Waters' party was. You are now seen as not that, even by Bernie Sanders.
You are now seen as the opposite of that, even by Bernie Sanders. So that just kind of bookends nicely with this clip we played at the start of the segment. And it's funny how on election night, the week after Election Day, when Democrats take a bath, the media gives some validation to Bernie and to the Bernie movement and said, maybe you should have gone that way. Why is it, though, that every time some kind of social spending is up for debate, they just piss all over it? Like, there's never any follow through, even with Build Back Better. It's, well, this is going to drive inflation. We can't do paid family leave, or, you can't make the child tax credit permanent. That's too expensive. It costs too much money. There never actually is any follow through about that. They always try and fuse the culture war stuff with the economic stuff. On MSNBC, Simone Sanders, there was this exchange between Donnie Deutsch and Simone Sanders where Deutsch says, well, the Democrats have to move to the center. And Simone says, well, by center, what do you mean? You mean we shouldn't care about trans people anymore? That's where the brain goes. That's where the brain goes.
Yeah.
Because that's the only debate the media can create.
Well, that's by design. And that's what we're going to see when we get into The View. Why do these people get a platform? Why do they get a microphone? Why have I noticed a shift over the last couple days towards the libs all falling back on the old trope? It's sexism, it's racism. Why? Because that is the instructions that they're getting from the media figures that they turn to for explanations and for framing. Those people are in that position for that reason. They want any conversation to take place except for a conversation about class, economics, militarism. They want us all fighting each other over racism, sexism, homophobia, transgenderism, which I have said this again and again. The idea that the reason that particular issue has been elevated as compassion is fucking absurd. It's absurd. If the issue were suffering children, you would talk about children growing up in poverty, for whom the statistics on self-deletion are much worse than for transgender children. There are far more of them than there are of transgender children. So if the issue is we have terrible sadness about the suffering of children, we'd be talking about poor children, right? But you're not. You're not. And very often the answer will be we can walk and chew gum at the same time. You can, but you don't.
No, they don't.
You don't. Why is that? They give a platform and a microphone to people who will elevate these bizarre, for most people completely irrelevant culture issues to avoid a meaningful discussion. Every minute that we're fighting about racism and sexism and the various panoply of phobias is another second that nobody is interfering with what the ruling class is doing. They have a free hand as long as you're down in the mud fighting about fucking nonsense.
Yeah, and there will never be a reckoning about that on the mainstream media in any real way.
That's what they're there for.
They pay lip service to it after Election Day. That's where you hear Chris Cuomo say that. For a minute. That's where you hear that woman on CNN. For a minute, they'll say, hey, maybe they should have taken Bernie a little bit more seriously. Maybe they shouldn't have sabotaged his movement, whether it was on behalf of Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden, depending on the year you put this out. But like I said at the top of the live stream, this represents a wave of bad decisions, one after the other after another, which you really can't call bad decisions. It was intentional. The intentional destruction and sabotage of the Bernie movement is what landed you here. And in a post-mortem, the week after an election landslide rout, they'll talk as if they actually are prepared to start taking that approach seriously, but they're not. Lee Fong makes a good point.
They're not
here.
Because that's not their purpose.
Yes.
That's why we always said they'd rather lose to Trump than win with Bernie. Because for them to win with Bernie, that is more existential than losing to Trump. Because at that point, they've lost the party in every meaningful way.
Exactly. So Lee Fang says there are no Dems with Bernie's 1991 to 2016 record of focusing solely on class and eschewing culture war, moderate on guns, anti-mass migration, over wage concerns, pro-police funding. Even Bernie abandoned his own record in 2020 and embraced rad-lib left weirdness. There's no bench. That's true. Right. There is no bench. There is no bench. And, you know,
every speech in 2020. We're against homophobia and racism and sexism. Every speech he started with that shit.
Well, there's a reason for that, and I will, I guess, die on this hill because I've said this over and over again. In 2020, he had no choice but to run that campaign the way he did. He had no choice but to embrace the rad-lib left weirdness because the populists who really fueled the 2016 campaign had either checked out or they voted for Donald Trump. Don't forget, 12% of the Bernie movement voted for Trump. So by 2020, there was no one left in the party to vote for a purely class-based, economics-driven sort of left populist campaign. He had to do it on their terms. This is why we Dem exited, because I realized that was an inevitable design flaw of the campaign going in. I said, look, he has no choice but to do this. They say, why is he parroting the Russiagate talking points? He has no choice. He's running as a Democrat. All the real populists left after the 2016 campaign. So now his only hope is to win over some of these libs. And that's why in 2016, he peaked at 47%. In 2020, even when he was primed to win the primary, he's peaking at 35% and taking advantage of the fact that there were 10 other candidates in the race. Because the libs just dominated the party to the point where if you wanted to be competitive at all, you had to sound more or less like a Democrat when you spoke. And that's why that campaign did not have the grittiness and the teeth and the mass appeal that the 2016 campaign did. 4 years out from that, yeah, what Lee Fang says here is absolutely right. There's no bench. There's no one who can speak that language.
The
and
squad
now you're
was supposed to be our bench.
Yeah, well, exactly. And now you're triply screwed because now what these election results show is that now the working people, they're with Trump.
Right.
They're with Trump. Now, the Republicans have to kind of choose their successor carefully. Obviously, J.D. Vance is going to have a huge leg up on the competition in 2028. I would bet there's probably a 75% chance of him being the nominee right now. Depending on how these 4 years go, you know, he might be the guy they pass the torch to. The Republicans have to be careful not to step back into the sort of Mitt Romney lane, which I don't think they can afford to do at this point, and I don't think they will. I don't think the primary voters will stand for that at this point because look at the composition of the party now. It's now a workers' party.
4 years of Trump will wipe out that wing of the party, more or less.
Exactly. So it's now a workers' party. So now, if you're the Democrats, where the hell do you go?
Right.
Where do you go? If this was an election,
completely irrelevant party now.
Yeah, exactly. Like if this was an election that was lost at the margins, lost in a couple different states, if Kamala won the popular vote, you could say, okay, we could stay in and grind our way out. Next time, with a result as sweeping as this, where do you go for working class politics in the Democratic Party? Nowhere. Nowhere.
We see this all through the whole liberal class project of the last decade or so, really in its purest form of the last decade or so. And this is why I say there's a cultural element as well as an economic element. Wealthy, privileged people are by definition a minority of the population. This particular iteration of the upper class grew so completely out of touch with the public in regards to manufacturing policy, in regards to cultural issues, right down to its views on just core moral values, just became completely out of touch with the population. And rather than to really try to persuade with the manner of aristocrats in all ages, they thought they were going to be able to dictate morality and dictate taste and dictate economic theory to the masses. They thought they were going to be able to piss on people's legs and tell them it's raining.
Right.
Right. Well, no, your town is not a hellhole because starting with Bill Clinton, we've been signing trade deals that deindustrialized it. It's that you've got too much racism and sexism in your town. That's why your town's a hellhole. You know what? You actually deserve it. You brought this on yourself because you didn't learn to code, you fucking racist. They thought all across, not just in the politics and culture and academia, they thought they were going to be able to take their worldview, a very bizarre worldview in my opinion, and impose it in film, in the university, in politics. They were going to tell the fucking peasants what to think. And unfortunately, and in spite of what some people might feel about 2020, the peasants still get to vote. Now, if that, I'm sorry, some people might not want to hear this. If this didn't prove that the Stop the Steal thing was bullshit, what would? So they did that then, but not this time? Why? Why not this time? Why last time and not this time? Okay, so the peasants still get a vote, and this is the final result of a failed liberal project to socially engineer people into accepting a very academic, very elite, very privileged view of the world in which, well, globalization, what are you going to do, is the answer to economic dislocation. And hey, man, if your son likes to put on dresses, well, we need to sterilize your kid. They try to impose this from the top on people, and this is the end result. From economics to culture, on every level, they cultivated a worldview that the vast majority, not a small majority, the vast majority of people do not accept. And here we are. It's the end of the liberal project as we know it. That's why I keep saying this particular election is going to create a culture shift very quickly of a type that we haven't seen since Reagan's election.
Yeah, and it did not have to be that way. First, you had a great opportunity under Obama to really turn the page. It's not that Obama was the first Democrat to screw working people. Obviously, you had Jimmy Carter, I would argue, really greased the skids for the Reagan era. And then you had Bill Clinton, obviously, with NAFTA. Clinton was very much a Reagan-era Democrat. Clinton did not really have the opportunity to redefine an era in American politics. Obama did, given the destruction of the Bush years, given the landslide. Don't forget, Obama won by a bigger landslide in 2008 than Trump won just now. He had a chance to redefine the core assumptions that underlie American politics. That should have been the beginning of a new era. It should have been an Obama era. It could have been the Obama era. Instead, he basically continued the Bill Clinton policies that was just an extension of the Reagan era, and now we're in the Trump era. They could have, you could have had a Bernie era, now you have a Trump era. So that is the story of this failure. And it's a story with a lot of moving parts. You can't pin it down to 1, 2, or 3 events. A landslide like this, you really can't. And so that is how you got here. That is how you got here.
If you need to sum it up in just one idea, it's this. There was never a natural base for a Wall Street-owned left party. Exactly. That was never going to work long term. That was always bound to fall apart under the weight of its own contradictions.
Yep. 100%. No doubt about that. All righty. Let's keep going. We got 2,084 here on YouTube, 1,600 over on Rumble. Folks, I want to take a quick game break here to tell you about our favorite podcast besides our own, the Heeb and Goy Show. The Heeb and Goy, which is co-hosted by our friend, the Motley Jew, Dan Richman, who apparently is a better political prognosticator than we are since he called the Trump route. But he's got a podcast. He does a podcast called Heeb and Goy about the humor and ironies and frustrations of daily life. You can go find that at the HeebandGoy.com. That's HeebandGoy, and spelled out, not with the ampersand. Or you can subscribe to his YouTube channel. Dan's called in. You all know Dan. You all love Dan. Hebe and Goy, they have a great YouTube channel as well. Not a politics channel, just easy listening humor about two guys navigating the frustrations of daily life. One from a Hebe perspective, one from a Goy perspective. The Goy is very funny too. That's how good the show is. Even the Goy is funny.
Even the Goy is funny. Yeah.
There you go. So hebeandgoy.com, or go to YouTube and search it in the search bar and hit that subscribe button.
He's like a Chevy Chase type.
Yeah, right, exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right,
no,
folks.
saw Maiden with the Hebe the other night.
That's right. That's right. Russell saw Iron Maiden with the Hebe the other nights. Blank state. Weird how voter turnout for both early voting and election day was reported as historic, yet total voter count was down by tens of millions from 2020. Yeah, I have to take a look more into the overall nationwide vote numbers in terms of how that panned out, but obviously you had Democrats getting about 20 million votes fewer. And I don't know if they still counted all of California. That takes a long time to count because it's the biggest population state. I don't know if that's all in, but that number could grow. Thank you, Blank State. Keep in mind, Israel's killed many more Americans than Iran has. Remember the USS Liberty, where Israel killed 34 alone. Thank you. Sparky, break it off in BlackRock by spoiling their Ukraine plans. Make Ukraine Russia again. You know, it's attitudes like that, Sparky, that have put Donald Trump back in power. So you should be ashamed of yourself.
Yeah,
How dare you
should
say
be
that?
ashamed.
Yeah. I heard that the Get Out the Amish vote worked in Pennsylvania. There you go. Yeah, apparently. Sparky says there's no longer a stigma about unwed pregnancy. So the abortion isn't as strong a political issue as it once was.
I don't know that that's it. I mean, I honestly, I don't know that anyone can quite figure out why that was so potent in 2022, which it clearly was. It's been very potent in every special election since Dobbs. Why not in this one?
Well, I think midterms, first of all, there was no federal race. It was all statewide, so it was more urgent in that sense. Now, not that there weren't statewide races here. There were, but I think that issue was overpowered by the turnout machine that is Donald Trump. Trump himself was not on the ballot in 2022. There was no figurehead driving turnout from the top. They were all statewide races, which means Dobbs loomed large over all those races.
I guess those were statewide. But he won white women. I would never have thought that post Dobbs.
Yeah, I mean, that is a surprising number. That is a surprising thing. But I would say that also in a midterm election where turnout is generally lower, an issue that might not have the national resonance that has plays a larger part because there's fewer overall voters, right? And the shock of that was very fresh in 2022 in those midterms. It was 6 months prior. Yeah. And I think also people were nervous about which laws were going to be passed, and so they wanted to empower Democrats at the state level. You saw surprisingly little of that this time. You had Bob Casey lose his seat in Pennsylvania. You had Sherrod Brown lose in Ohio. Republicans take the Senate. The only guy who seems to be holding on to his seat somehow, not holding on to his seat, but winning the vacant seat left open by Sinema is Ruben Gallego, who, I mean, make that make sense. A, progressive as Democrats go, Hispanic Democrat beats Kerry Lake in a wave year for Trump based largely on immigration in a border state. Make that make sense, but it is. Man, Kerry Lake, what a loser. I mean, she's a real loser.
Total loser.
Yeah, total loser. I mean, that's pretty bad to lose that race. Love how the Greens hit the Dems where it hurts in Dearborn. There you go. Thank you, Lori Lamb. Appreciate that. Michael Castillo says, good afternoon, gentlemen. Your show is dope. Thank you. You're dope, Michael Castillo. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Michael.
Sir Bikes a Lot Day says, look up the Amish vote and raw milk. All right. That sounds interesting. Daniel Hall, thanks for the $10. Kamala blew $1 billion war chest and the campaign is $20 million in debt. Imagine spending $1 billion on white cucked husbands for Harris and Beyonce to pull an Axl Rose. Yeah, what a pyramid scheme. Thank you for that. Sparky, fun fact, both Ukraine and Israel have taxpayer-funded health care. American taxpayers, that's right. Skyman, thanks for the Skyman, thanks for the $5. Let's foster an appeal to the most ineffective and neurotic people who make up our base, all while offering nothing. It's brilliant. The Dems. Yes, thank you.
That is a very good way to put it, yes.
Luca Dalbello, did you notice RT was unbanned from YouTube? I did not. I did not notice that. That's good to know.
That is very good news, man. You know, I guess given that I can say this. You know, our friend Dan Cohen, who was nice enough to have me over for dinner when I was traveler in DC. His wife works for RT, and it was a little uncertain how that was going to go. So good. I'm very glad to hear that.
Yeah. Hollywood, thanks for the $5. Why did you guys shill for Jill Stein after saying how useless the Greens were? A little lesser evil going on? My Green chapter in Massachusetts was pathetic. Well, first of all, we said over and over again that we're supporting Jill Stein because Abandon Harris is supporting Jill Stein, simply in solidarity with them, not as an endorsement of the Greens. So that's what I would say. I mean, it wasn't a lesser evil vote. The lesser evil thing doesn't come into play when the candidate has no chance of taking power. Like the lesser evil calculation only applies where one side is going to take power and the other isn't, and you say, well, gun to my head, I'd rather this person have power than this one. There's no lesser evil formulation with a third party that's going to peak at 2% if they're super lucky. So, no, it was not a lesser evil. It was simply backing the play of the Abandon Harris movement. That's it. That was everything. Call
solidarity on the left.
That's right. Yes. Yes. Okay. Folks, we got one more segment. This is kind of a two-parter, but after this segment, we are switching to Rumble. So if you want to head over there now, you can get a head start. DoDissidents.com/Rumble. There will be a 5-minute intermission on the break, so you don't have to move right away if you don't want to, but that's where we're heading after this last piece, which, like I said, is in two parts. So, folks, one person who was very happy about Donald Trump's victory was Benjamin Netanyahu. Dear Donald and Melania Trump, congratulations on history's greatest comeback. Your historic return to the White House offers a new beginning for America and a powerful recommitment to the great alliance between Israel and America. Yeah, who do you think he was rooting for? This is a huge victory. In true friendship, yours, Benjamin and Sarah Netanyahu. There's the picture.
It's just
of the three
easier
of them
when you don't have to pretend not to be doing genocide.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It'll make things a lot easier. In Trump victory, Netanyahu sees himself as the great winner, the Washington Post writes here. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejoiced over Donald Trump's election victory as he banked on resetting relations with Washington and following through on his maximalist aims in the country's multi-front war. Netanyahu congratulated Trump on history's greatest comeback in a post on X Wednesday morning as the results became clear, but before many had made a final call, hailing his return to the White House as a new beginning for America and a powerful recommitment to the great alliance between U.S. and Israel. Later Wednesday, the two men spoke by phone, agreeing to work together for Israel's security and discussing the Iranian threat, according to a statement from the Prime Minister's office. It's time for total victory, crowed Itamar Ben-Gvir, Netanyahu's far-right national security minister, in an address to the Knesset on Wednesday, adding that he was confident Trump would see eye to eye with Israel on all sorts of laws, quote-unquote, that he has been trying to push through, including the death penalty for Palestinians convicted of terrorism, which you could imagine that's basically anything, because they'll throw a Palestinian child in jail for throwing a rock at a tank. Israel Gans, head of a council representing Israeli settlers across the occupied West Bank, celebrated the moment as a historic opportunity for the settlement movement, which has already made significant gains since Netanyahu returned to power in 2022. Netanyahu thinks, quote, he is now the great winner on all fronts, said Gail Talshir, a political scientist from Hebrew University who is in close contact with members of the Israeli defense establishment. Yoel Guzansky, a former official on Israel's National Security Council, said millions of Israelis believe simultaneously that their national survival is at stake as its military confronts Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Iran and its proxies across the region, and that Netanyahu may be incapable of translating military gains into long-term security. And though many Israelis appreciate the near unconditional military and political support President Joe Biden has offered since the October 7th attacks, many believe their country will be better off under Trump. There's a feeling in the Middle East that Biden's softness towards Iran, his attempts the first 2 years to get a nuclear deal, is part of the reason that they felt emboldened, and indirectly their proxies also felt confidence, Guzansky said. But while Trump could allow Israel to go after Tehran more aggressively, analysts said he could also insist that Netanyahu end the fighting in Gaza and Lebanon by the time he is sworn in on January 20th. Nadav Tamir, a former Israeli diplomat and now executive director of the J Street lobbying group in Washington, wrote in the Israeli newspaper Haaretz on Wednesday. Trump's vision for the Middle East remains an open question. On the campaign trail, he backed Israel's right to self-defense while courting Arab and Muslim voters disenchanted with the Biden administration's Gaza policy. He has a strong working relationship with the Saudi royal family, which Israel has long hoped will agree to a normalization pact, but Riyadh is now demanding a declared path to Palestinian statehood as part of the price. In his victory speech overnight Tuesday, as Israeli forces besieged one of northern Gaza's last remaining hospitals and launched airstrikes across eastern Lebanon, Trump vowed he was going to stop wars. Muin Rabini, a non-resident fellow at Qatar's Center for Conflict and Humanitarian Studies, called Trump a wild card, saying he might back controversial but increasingly popular far-right Israeli policies like the annexation of Palestinian territory, but could also lose interest in the region. The difference between a Trump and Harris administration is that Harris has kind of a principled commitment to Israel, and everything is subordinate to that, he said. Whereas for Trump, he couldn't care less about Israel and the Palestinians or anything or anyone else, provided it serves his interests. So you have Netanyahu congratulating Donald Trump. They talked on the phone. He obviously affirms his commitment to Israel's security. The Israeli government obviously happy about this, with the caveat that Netanyahu says he might try to end the fighting by the time Trump gets in, which could just mean now he has license to just tell Joe Biden to go fuck himself and do whatever the hell he wants. Because don't forget, even as Biden was threatening, remember way back when Biden says, well, Rafah's going to be our red line, which turns out it wasn't. But even if it was, they had already had enough weapons to keep fighting for, I forget the exact figure, but it was months after a weapons pause would have ostensibly been enacted if they crossed the red line, which, again, none of that was an actual red line. The point is, Trump takes over in 3 months. So at this point, the ball is kind of in Netanyahu's court. Like, the relationship between Netanyahu and Trump is now much more important than the relationship between Netanyahu and Biden, since Netanyahu already has the materials he needs to hold him over through January. And so now it's about conversations between Netanyahu and Trump, and all indications are, as we said would be the case before Election Day, Netanyahu's happy with this outcome. I went as far as to suggest, there's no evidence for this, this is just a hunch, I will say that, but I went as far as to suggest, hey, maybe the reason why he escalated so much in October was because he wanted Trump to win, and he knew a major escalation would create more political headaches for Kamala Harris. These people are so evil, there's nothing you can't put anything past them. There's no calculation is too cruel for them. And so now you're here.
Yeah. I hear Trump is also going to back Gavir, wants to pass a no fixing the tip bill. You can't fix the tip with Jewish restaurant patrons anymore in Israel. Another example of apartheid. You'll still be able to fix the tip with Palestinians.
Well, Trump was bragging. He asked Itmar Ben-Gvir, he said, did you hear about my no tax on tip policy? And Ben-Gvir said, what's a tip?
Yeah, he didn't even know.
You didn't understand.
He didn't even know.
So what,
he said,
tip?
what?
What
Is that like just the tip? Is that what you mean? Like just the tip? All my kids were born that way. Trump is a wild card, though. I have always felt with Trump, he doesn't like war. He finds it wasteful. He finds it messy. And he also has pretty good political instincts. I think he knows that it would be good for him politically to have like the hostages being freed as Reagan is inaugurated. I think he would very much like to see this get settled before he assumes office. That's your only hope. That's your only hope, that maybe he'll put some kind of check on them. Like, look, you got to wrap this up.
Well, this is the thing, and, this is why I said it's going to fall to the MAGA base. You have an interview that we're going to be showing on Sunday's show with a MAGA for Palestine person at the Rescue the Republic rally. We're going to show a confrontation between Rabbi Shmuley and a MAGA for Palestine guy on the Rumble side. Like, if the
this
rank
is the
and
leadership,
file,
it's not the base. They
well, this is the
are
thing,
not
like,
into this shit.
If the base is not into this shit, now's the time to say something, because one thing we know about Trump is that what's most important to him are his numbers. He likes to be liked. That's what made him run for president. Well, you think the guy needed to run for president? You think the guy had real political conviction? I mean, he got into it because he thought, hey, this is a way to really parlay my star power into becoming the most famous and powerful person on earth. That's clearly what he wants more than anything else, is good ratings and good numbers. And so if he thinks this is going to hurt his ratings and his numbers, there's a chance he says, listen, it's just too much. It's crazy. Right. But that falls to the base, because he won't do that unless he feels like he's going to be unloved if he doesn't do that. So to everybody with the MAGA hats on, it's put up or shut up time. You have to start making noise about this right now, because these conversations between Trump and Netanyahu are happening right now. Netanyahu already has what he needs. He doesn't need Joe Biden anymore. He's already got the weapons to hold him over through January. And so now it's about the relationship between Trump and Netanyahu. And if you want to influence that, you're the ones who can do it. Now's the time. So let's go on to a sort of B part of this, which, Russell, you're going to quarterback. Here we go.
All right. So foreign leaders, boy, are they happy? Are they happy at this result? Netanyahu aside. With former President Donald Trump set to reprise his role as the commander-in-chief of the world's most powerful military and largest economy, and with him wasting no time in claiming victory in the U.S. presidential election, leaders around the world started reacting Wednesday to the reality of a second term in the White House for the businessman turned politician. From enthusiasm voiced by Israel's leader as he wages an expanding multi-front war, to anxieties from some of America's closest generations-old European allies, the reaction to Trump's election performance started rolling in long before the final votes were counted across the U.S. Benjamin Netanyahu offered his congratulations to Trump on Wednesday, calling his election performance history's greatest comeback. Your historic return to the White House offers a new beginning for America and a powerful recommitment to the great alliance between Israel and America. This is a huge victory. See, this is what little bitches the people in government are. The Biden administration knew this whole time that Israel was rooting for Trump, and they still wouldn't cut them off.
Yep.
Despite Trump's criticism of the Israeli leaders' handling of the ongoing war against Hamas in the Gaza Strip, Netanyahu was widely believed to favor the former U.S. leader in the election. Tension between Washington and Tel Aviv has risen sharply over the last year, with President Biden and others criticizing Israel's tactics in its multi-front war with Iranian-backed groups in the Middle East. So there's another thing. If you remember a few months ago, Trump, in an interview with, I think it was Israeli journalists, said, yeah, it's too much. You never know with that crazy bastard. He could turn around in the middle of an interview and say, it's horrible what they're doing to the children there. You don't know with him.
We'll see.
Ukraine's wartime president, Volodymyr Zelensky, congratulated Trump Wednesday, while shitting his pants, for what he called an impressive election victory, and said he looked forward to an era of a strong United States of America under President Trump's decisive leadership. Quote, I recall our great meeting with he's shitting himself. I recall our great meeting with President Trump back in September. He's got a team that told him the best way to Trump's heart is to flatter him, which is not the wrong approach, frankly. When we discussed in detail the Ukraine-U.S. strategic partnership, the Victory Plan, and ways to put an end to Russian aggression against Ukraine. Zelensky said in a social media post, adding that his country was interested in developing mutually beneficial political and economic cooperation that will benefit both of our nations. Zelensky offered no comment on Trump's repeated vows to quickly end the nearly 3-year war that began with Russia's full-scale invasion in early 2022. It really began with the Maidan coup, but they're not going to mention that. His government and his commanders on the battlefield have voiced growing concern that Trump could dramatically reduce or even halt the huge American support for Ukraine's military effort to repel Russia's invasion. One of the first foreign leaders to offer congratulations to Trump on Wednesday was one of the very few who openly backed him long before the final votes were cast in the U.S. Hungary's far-right president, Viktor Orban, who's been accused during his decades-long leadership of the Eastern European nation of eroding its democratic institutions by giving himself more power and limiting that of the country's courts and civil society institutions, called Trump's apparent success a much-needed victory for the world. In a message posted on social media, Orban said Trump had pulled off the biggest comeback in U.S. political history and congratulated him on his enormous win. You know, I don't know why everyone's dissing Grover Cleveland like this.
Yeah, I know.
He gets no respect.
No respect. Get no respect.
He gets no respect. In a speech over the summer, Orban suggested he had even helped to craft Trump's future statecraft, claiming to have, quote, entered the policy writing system of President Donald Trump's team with deep involvement there. Leonid Slutsky, it's a hard name to get through life with, who heads the Committee on International Affairs in Russia's State Duma or Parliament, was quoted Wednesday by the country's state-run RIA Novosti news agency as saying a Trump victory offered a chance for a more constructive approach to the Ukrainian conflict. Can we expect changes in approaches to the role of the U.S. in the Ukrainian conflict, which has been fueled by the Democratic administration since 2014? Judging by the election rhetoric, if it can still be believed, the Republican team is not going to send more and more American taxpayers' money into the furnace of a proxy war against Russia, Slutsky was quoted as saying. Perhaps there is a chance for a more constructive approach here. Slutsky did not mention on Trump's repeated vows to end the war in Ukraine quickly if reelected, something European and Ukrainian leaders fear he could do by halting America's vast military support for Kyiv and forcing Ukraine to accept Russia's takeover of significant Ukrainian territory. Quote, we will draw conclusions based on concrete steps and concrete words, he said, adding that it would be practically impossible for Trump to damage U.S. relations with Moscow as they're at their lowest point in history. Yeah, hard to get worse than it is now. We will continue to view and handle China-U.S. relations in accordance with the principles of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and cooperation for win-win, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said Wednesday. We respect the choice of the American people and congratulate Mr. Trump on his election as president. There was no immediate public reaction from President Xi Jinping. Trump has often described China as a primary U.S. adversary, and he's pledged to continue a tit-for-tat tariff feud with the Asian nation. So, yeah, there's a separate story. We'll do it on Sunday. That the Biden administration, you know, because they haven't fucked up the world enough, is rushing to get military aid out to Ukraine, right, so that they can keep the war going for as long as possible. You know, I can't remember exactly what the month was, but originally presidents didn't assume the office until the following fall. They changed it because of this, because of a tendency of the outgoing administration to try to do things that the incoming administration would not want done. So they moved it back to January so there'd be a much smaller window for this. But this is a very good example of that. Like, clearly that is not what the American public wants. That is how little shit these people give about that. If they wanted that, they wouldn't have elected Donald Trump. But they're going to try to subvert the will of the public. These people who tell you, they cry these salty tears about how much they care about democracy. It seems very anti-democratic to try to subvert the policy of the incoming president that the American people just overwhelmingly voted for.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is the piece of it that really scares them is these, relationships with other countries, the stability of our alliances, the defining of our adversaries, because I mean that's really what Trump's real crime against them is just defining adversaries as not even as friends. I mean, he's not allied. I mean, Trump was hawkish against Russia when he was president. Trump armed Ukraine before Biden armed Ukraine. But he treats them as negotiating partners, as sort of, autonomous agents who he respects in the sense that he says they have their own countries that they're advocating for. And,
like a rival business.
Right, exactly, like a rival business. They come to the table with us and we work it out, whereas we are not supposed to view them that way. We're supposed to view them as enemies, to be crushed, or at the very least to be controlled or boxed in. And, this is the kind of thing that really gets them worried. Now, in terms of the will of the American people, I wish foreign policy were higher on their list of priorities than it was, but it was very, very, very low. That's part of why they try to do this, too, because they feel like there's no political price to pay since most people don't really pay attention, right? Although in the Ukraine thing, I mean, that's pretty blatant. I mean, people do pay attention to that.
Well, because it's partly an economic issue, because people see how easily they're able to find the money for Ukraine.
Right.
When the American people need something, it's going to cause inflation. Oh, we don't have the money. We can't just go into debt for this.
Right.
So I think the Ukraine thing offends people on a class level.
Yes, I think so, too. I think that is what gave that extra potency. And I mean, the irony is that a lot of the people who tell you, well, we're spending money for Ukraine that we can't spend on our own people here, a lot of those people don't want to spend money here anyway.
Exactly.
But that's the next step.
Yeah.
All right, let's take some super chats, and then we'll take Rumble rants over on the Rumble side because we are switching to Rumble for the second part of the show here. We still got a few more segments to do, so we hope you guys will all come with us. That's dudissidents.com/Rumble. Let's get to some super chats before we make the switch. Jojo in 3D, thanks for the $10. I'm gay and see a lot of my LGBTQIA equals MC squared people posting hotlines to call for a crisis since Trump won.
Jesus
and it makes
Christ.
me wonder, am I the crazy one for not giving a F? No, you're not. But that's
not.
That's part of the media mechanism. That's part of that.
And let me just say, since you mentioned it, other than not sterilizing children or letting men compete in women's sports, what exactly are they threatening to do to that community? They're not signaling any change in policy. Other than these very fringe ideas.
Yeah. Zoe, thanks for the $1.99. There were ballot measures protecting abortions. That is true, too. A lot of states did put it on their ballot. New York did. Tom, thanks for the $4.99. I don't agree with you guys on the trans issues, but I'm a leftist, not a lib, who has to plug my ears to differing opinions. Maiden rules. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate you. Jackass, Whiskey, and whatever I don't know what the rest of your screen name is. Medicare for All never passed because of private sector unions that negotiated health care for their members. Well, that's another thing that we didn't get into in the Bernie segment. Tusker made a really great point on election night. That, there's got to be a part of the ruling class that regrets not just letting Bernie through. Because if Bernie went through, like you said, they weren't going to let him do Medicare for All. They would have, he would have passed paid family leave or something. And for a small price like that, they could have just had their global order. Instead, look at what the fuck they did.
Right.
Instead, now look what they got.
Short-term thinking.
Exactly. Short-term thinking and just greed of, no, 97% is not good enough. We need all of it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Prester John, thanks for the $9.99. Peanut the dead squirrel is now the mascot of the political movement that stopped the dead rabbits from running 5 points. Rest in power, Peanut. the uniter. Thank you, Preston.
I think when we go to the worker strike back organizing meeting in February, we should have a graphic design ready to go as our proposed symbol for the new party. It'll be a whale with a squirrel riding on its back.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there you go. Isn't there a cartoon whale with a snail on his back? That's what it is. A whale and a snail. Not a whale and a squirrel. Peter Monahan, thanks for the $20, Peter. Just checking in. Thank you for all you've done. Of course. Thank you, Peter. Healing well. That's great to know. Thank you, New Dissidents family. Love you all so much. Long road to go. Chemo and radiation is next. Shoulders forward, chest out, walking through the wall. Well, best of luck with everything, Peter. Obviously, keep in touch with us, obviously. But glad to hear the surgery went well. Defeating Harris, says Bill Edley, sets up future winning progressive moves in chess. It's called a queen sacrifice. Yes, a queen sacrifice. I mean... Yeah, for us, I would say. Well, I mean,
been trying to explain that
for the rank and file. Yeah, exactly. Now for the Democrats, I mean, they kind of needed to have this at least closer. They needed to come at least closer. You know, I said going into this, it's not the end of the world for Democrats if they lose, because they'll just be able to, you know, gin up the Trump derangement syndrome again and go back out there. And that would have been true had, like, Kamala won the popular vote and they lost by a few thousand votes here or there, but that's not what happened. This was a rout. This was a mandate, which fucks that up for them. Like, they needed to do better than this, which I thought they would. I mean, honestly, I thought they were just going to win.
Yeah.
Jimmy Dore. Hey, Jimmy, how's it going?
What's up, JD?
What's up, JD? COVID was a manufactured crisis. It had a very low fatality rate. It affected the elderly very much like the flu. Well, I mean, what I said about 2020 was, you know, Trump deferred to Fauci and pretended that that was not a thing. And that, I don't think, played to people. That it obviously didn't. It obviously didn't. And that's why I think he lost. And I do think he lost. And, you know, for the House and home for $10, says election fraud statistically likely for 20, obvious winning deep state play, allow Trump's election, then unalive him. Yeah, that's not more. That seems a lot more convoluted and complicated than just, you know, manipulating the vote if they could, and if they wanted to. Faith in elections restored, anoint Vance, Trump gone. I don't think that's gonna. Okay, so if Trump makes it to Inauguration Day, what's the next theory?
Yeah,
why would they?
Why would they want Vance?
Yeah. No, I think people are herd animals. When they sense a crisis is afoot, they rush to authority. I don't think Trump provided them the comfort that they looked for in a typical authority. Yeah. And so they voted for the next best thing down the line, and that was fucking Joe Biden. And it would have been anybody. I think they could have run any Democrat. And just as a default, they would have won. That's how I think that would have happened.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't the brilliant campaign Joe Biden ran. It wasn't his magnificent oratory. They just hit him in a basement and let Trump self-destruct.
Exactly. And he did self-destruct. And you talk about no message. I mean, Trump had no message in 2020. I mean, there's nothing. I mean, I can't even think of one thing he ran on.
I can't even tell you what he ran on.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you one thing he ran on in that campaign. And I didn't think this campaign was great either. That's why I thought he was going to win. I thought he was going to lose because
that was another reason he closed very badly.
Yeah.
But hey, man, this is what we said before we went out on the limb. You could argue it either way, and we said in hindsight, whoever wins, it's going to look obvious. Right. Like if Kamala had won, the story would have been he ran a very weird campaign. He kind of imploded at the end. Dobbs brought out the women. And on the other side, the argument, terrible inflation, a lot of economic pain. Kamala is such a shitty politician. She couldn't even make it to Iowa with the whole media pulling for her and trying to anoint her from the second that Hillary lost. So, of course, you know, in the end, you couldn't beat. In the end, the message is you can't beat something with nothing, and Kamala was nothing.
Yep. And that realignment is permanent, lasting, if not permanent.
Yes.
Jackass Whiskey says, as a fairly wealthy person, I love to tip at least 30%. Oh, but you don't like to super chat above $5 though. I see how it is. I see how that is.
Look at that. Look
Very
at
nice.
that.
Just kidding, of course. Bought some takeout for $19 and tipped $20.
At least now with Trump, we're
Thank
not
you.
going to get taxed on these super chats.
Well,
The
that we
tips.
have to lobby for that, because as of now, super chats are not counted as tips, but that's going to have to change. We're going to have to lobby Google
That's going to
for
have
that.
to change. If
Yeah.
Trump wants our support,
Yeah,
that's the price.
yeah, right. That's the price.
If he wants the due dissidence bump,
yeah, exactly.
that's the price.
We'll sell out for super chats. Bought some takeout for $19 and tipped $20. That is a nice tip, Jackass Whiskey. I appreciate people in food service, as do we. Eric Maines, thanks for the $5. Did Russell send some of his wine to Kim Iverson election night? Girl was pounding it down. Hope she can repeat appearance with you in the future. BYOB. I would love to have Kim Iverson back.
Yeah, she was very cool.
Oh, Luca Dalbello says I was wrong about RT. Sorry for the fake news, Russ.
Oh.
Oh.
See, now I wouldn't have talked about that then.
Wouldn't have said that. I forget what you even said. But all right. So dudissidence.com/rumble. That's where we're going to go. dudissidence.com/rumble. We still got more show. We got Rumble rants to read over there. We will read all Rumble rants on Rumble when we make the switch over. But that is where we are headed right now.
And we are covering The View in Morning.
The View in Morning.
Little Schadenfreude. They actually went on air in black.
There you go. So, folks, dudissidence.com/rumble. We have a good crowd filing in over there right now. 2,100. Hey, well, there's 2,100 of you. Make sure you head over there, folks. We're going to finish the show over on the Rumble side. Appreciate you all being here. We'll be back on YouTube Sunday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, but we're going to see you all in 5 minutes after this brief intermission. So meet us over there. Until then, be safe and be well.
Whoops. Courage!
Please clap.